Indeed. Some very familiar artwork to your right,
Yeah, yeah,
exactly.
yeah. We this is just like a promo space right now. We've got some things.
I love it. And well, look, is that a gold album up there?
That's my
Gold?
gold record.
How
Yeah,
cool.
I know. It's
That's
pretty
amazing.
awesome.
Well, look, thanks so much for joining us. It's so thrilled to have you join our live stream. Before we begin, I wanted to start today by acknowledging the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community. We pay our respects to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. Now, I'm sure 99.9% of people on this stream know exactly who you are, but it pays to do a little bit of a reminder about what an incredible artist you are. So you are an award-winning songwriter, artist, and performer. And even though you kind of came to our attention, I guess, in 2016 with the Elsewhere EP and, of course, the song Drive, I know you've been working up towards that for many, many years since you were a child. You followed up that EP with Here and Now in 2018, and of course have just released your debut album, Begin
Yeah.
to Look Around, which is a phenomenal record, and we're going to talk about that shortly. Now, for the 99.9% of people on this stream who know who you are, you probably don't know who I am. So let me tell you a little bit about myself. I'm Rod. I work for a company called Jaxsta, and Jaxsta is the world's biggest database of official music credits. So if you want to know who performed on a piece of music or who engineered it or mixed it or wrote it on an album like this, for example, you can go to jaxsta.com. And of course, as well, if you are one of those songwriters or performers, or engineers or triangle players, you can go to jaxsta.com and search for your profile and claim it and do all sorts of cool stuff which will help you with your career. So this is the first Jaxsta live stream that we have ever done, and there are a couple of reasons why we're doing it. One is, of course, to talk about Begin to Look Around. The other is to talk about Drive, the song you released in 2016 and for which you won the Vanda Young Global Songwriting Competition. And if people aren't aware of what the Vanda Young Songwriting Competition is, it's pretty much one of the world's most prestigious songwriting competitions. And it's open to songwriters all around the world, whether you're published or unpublished. And there is about $80,000 in prize money up for grabs, which could change the life of a songwriter out there. So if you write songs and you think you've got some pretty good ones, you should submit them to the Vanda Young Global Songwriting Competition. Entries close Friday, October the 8th. I think it's a Friday. It's definitely October the 8th. And you can submit your entries at apramcos.com.au. And the final thing I'll say about that competition is that all the proceeds go to an amazing organisation called the Nordoff Robbins Australia. And Nordoff Robbins uses music therapy to improve the lives of children and adults who have been affected by a range of difficulties, whether physical, psychological, cognitive, and they use that music therapy to improve their lives. So it's an incredible organisation, a great cause, and a wonderful competition. So look, talking about Vanda Young and Drive, why don't we start having a quick chat to you about that? Even though I know it's, what is it now, 5 years ago, so the memory might be a little bit dim. But so am I right in thinking you started writing it when you were about 16 or 17?
17, yes. Yeah, it was a song that kind of started to come together in the space of the music department of my high school, Princess Hill, here in Melbourne. And then I worked on it over a couple of months. The way that I used to write songs when I would write by myself is I would often kind of work on ideas and then I would leave it for a bit and I'd come back to it. And now the thought of that is like, it's so funny. I don't usually do that. I try and write like the bulk of the song in one go and just stick to it. But I did, yeah, I eventually returned to writing Drive at Audrey Studios here in Coburg. We were putting together like a original songs compilation CD for Princess Hill because there were so many songwriters at Princess Hill. And I think I had an idea to record another song, but I had Drive pretty much finished. Well, I think I said it as like a challenge that day. I was like, I reckon I could get a version of this finished so I could record it for the sake of this. So there is a CD out there with a bunch of my friends and our original songs on it. And there's a version of Drive that has like a different second verse because we ended up going back and changing stuff. But
Wow.
that's kind of when it was born. Yeah, in that era of my life when I was in high school and surrounded by other people in the music department at Prinny Hill. And yeah, that's how it kind of came into the world, I suppose.
Do you remember what the inspiration was, or what the first little light bulb that went off in your head when you started to think about writing the lyrics with the song and the music?
I think Drive was kind of like, in a way, a little bit of a patchwork of like ideas that I had accumulated over the course of probably like the past couple of years. Because I suppose being in school, it's like, for me, as much as music was a huge part of my life, like that, you know, school was obviously the main event that was happening. And so when it came to committing to finishing songs, like I was often kind of picking all of these things that I'd already thought about, whether I was brainstorming on the tram on the way to school or in my journals. And so there was little pieces of voice notes. And then I was like, well, I'm going to kind of dip back in and grab that melody from that one, or like this lyric idea that I had. So I think the reason why it kind of came together in the way that it did was that it was all of these ideas that I had addressed and flagged as, this is important, I need to come back to this. It was like an accumulation of all of those notes, I suppose. But yeah, no, I think conceptually, I mean, it's very much a song that kind of oddly celebrates unrequited love and just focuses on that feeling of like, it's still a wonderful feeling, even if it's kind of all in your imagination. And I was, you know, thinking about the space of a car and how when you're driving, like it's such a kind of confessional, intimate space. Like if you're on a long drive with someone, you kind of can get sucked into this vortex of having like a deep conversation, because I can't remember who said this to me, but someone said it to me pretty recently. You're not looking at each other. So there's not really like the pressure, and you end up kind of, you know, opening up, and just then you land yourself in the middle of this like really intense moment with someone. Often that can happen whether it's friendship based or romantically based, as the song was kind of inspired in that world. But that was kind of what I was trying to unpack in Drive. But it was all up in my little teenage imagination in my head, which I really like because it's kind of captured this like innocence from that point in my life as well. So yeah, that's the story.
And that symbolism of driving, I mean, I think you revisit it on Begin to Look Around as well in It's Christmas Philly.
Constantly. Yes, exactly. Philly is a very good example of that feeling, actually. That confessional space. And yeah, you kind of, I wrote that about my friend Sam and how we were kind of opening up to each other about our like respective heartbreak scenarios. And yeah, and then you kind of realize, oh, we've been talking about this for a long time. I didn't expect to like land in this place, but you know, it's so nice because you learn from each other and you learn from those conversations. And I mean, I love writing about driving. I think there are a few moments on Begin to Look Around actually where I reference that. And I mean, I think it's funny now because it's just something that so naturally bleeds into a lot of songs that I write. And like I've had collaborators be like, do we need to have the car metaphor in this one too? Like we could change it. Yeah. So, you know, just out of habit, I suppose.
Do you have a favorite driving song?
Ooh, do I have a favorite driving song? Oh man. I would have so many. I would have just so many, but I think like my favorite songs to listen to when driving, like at the moment, obviously because of lockdown and restrictions and limitations and stuff, like I'm really missing driving with my two best friends, my two girlfriends, Megan and Leah. And when we're driving, like we'll listen to a lot of Fleetwood Mac and Phoebe Bridgers and Casey Musgraves and just like, yeah. And so I think probably within that world, yeah, and just listening to like playlists that we've made when we're hanging out.
Yeah, nice one. You mentioned briefly the recording of the song. I guess that initial recording you did where you had a separate verse. When you think about the song as we know it now, what do you remember of going to the studio and recording the version that we all know now? Does anything really stick out to you?
Yeah, it was just like, I mean, it sounds very cliche, but it was a really happy time. Like I had gone in to actually do a guide track for Towers, which is a song that was also on Here and Now. And Josh, who produced Drive and Towers, was, and Elsewhere and Here and Now, a lot of my work I've done with Josh. And I had played him and Jonathan Dreyfus, who is my string arranger on all of my music, but also a producer in his own right. And I had played both of them Drive when we had started pre-production for Towers. And then we had a day in the studio so we could record drums. And then Josh was like, do you want to do that one as well? Like, do you want to just do drive as well? And I was like, okay, sure, like if you have time. And then I arrived at the Avery, and the Avery studio in Collingwood like holds many, many special memories for me, like coming into my own as a songwriter and as someone in a studio space, and just kind of falling more in love with being a musician. And I arrived at the Avery, and Josh opened the door and was singing the chorus of Drive. And I just remember being like, oh my gosh, I think we're going to have like a really good day. And then we did. And I remember doing like guide vocal takes. And we were playing as a band, because the band was in one room and I was doing vocals and guitar in another. And I kept just like laughing because I was so happy. I couldn't believe how happy I was. I was so excited about the song. And I think the melody in the chorus, it was so pop for me at the time. Like it was so kind of daring and like, oh my gosh, we're doing like a pop kind of like a repetition thing. And I'd been in this safe folk world, which is like totally where I was supposed to be at that point. But it was like I'd opened this door to like all of these, to kind of like a pathway that I could actually realistically go down. And it wasn't just like something I'd imagined when I was really little. Because obviously when I was this tiny, tiny person, I was always thinking about like doing big, colorful, fun videos and like having a big career. But, you know, you kind of dismiss that. And then when we wrote Drive, it was like, oh, but maybe this is the gateway into something quite like that. So, yeah, it was a really good day. And then when I did the vocals for it with Jono, by the time that Josh had actually moved to Nashville, when I did the vocals in Jono's apartment, I was kind of like just having the best time. And I was really into it and I had my eyes closed. And I remember like opening my eyes at one point and Jono was just like laughing, like the same thing of just like, it was like, sometimes when you make music, there's this element of almost disbelief that you can't believe how much all of you are simultaneously loving the thing that you're making. And it really does feel like magic. So, yeah, it was so, I'm so happy that I got that. I feel so lucky that I had that time creating this song.
Yeah, and that's such an amazing memory, because I imagine not every time you go into the studio is perhaps quite as happy.
I mean, I think that a lot of collaborators have been extremely patient with me. I'm like very obsessive, and when I get tunnel vision, it's like I have to get this thing right. And some days it's just not there. Some days you just don't write the song that you want to, or you just don't record the way you want to. You don't sing in a way that you're happy with. And yeah, I mean, making Begin to Look Around, like, you know, Robbie was amazing because he would always match my energy, whether it was ecstatic or like, oh, I feel pretty like defeated, and he would be like, okay, well then let's go get a coffee. And you know, it's yeah, I mean, there are definitely days when you kind of, you're making something that is so important to you, and you really want to do it justice to what you kind of imagine it's going to be like in your head. And it's like, I have to get it as close to that as possible. It has to all feel right. And like, I'm just very particular about how I, you know, work on my craft. And yeah, I don't know. I think that it was kind of like with Drive, it was kind of one of those songs where just like we were making it, and then when we released it too, it was just like thing after thing after thing. It was just like this really, and which is so, I'm so glad that I loved it, because sometimes people can release songs and be like, yeah, and then that's the one that everyone loves, you know, and that's cool. But I always loved it so much, so it's really nice that people liked it too.
That's cool. And that Robbie who you mentioned, that's Robbie Tassar, who worked on Begin. Yeah, amazing and songwriter. Just a couple more things about Drive. So when you won the Vanda Young Global Songwriting Competition, was that in your exam period? Like, were you doing exams at that point to finish year 12?
It was so ridiculous. Yeah, I missed a call from Millie from APRA to tell me that I'd won. I'd like entirely forgotten about it at this point, because I was just like exams, and I really wanted to like finish school and do well, and I'd been studying really hard. And we were coming up to the first exam. It was a day before, and I was doing like what felt like the millionth practice exam, and I turned my phone off and then finished the exam, put it away, and then turned my phone on, and I had all these missed calls, and I was like, what? And then I called Millie, and the way that she said it as well was not, "You've won the Vanda and Young songwriting competition." It was, "Hey, Greta, you've just won $50,000. Like, that was the way that she worded it. And my tiny 18-year-old brain was like, what? Like, I've just been writing about like language analysis for the past 3 hours. Sorry. And then I was like, she was like, so you need to come to Sydney tomorrow. And I was like, right. Millie, I have an English exam. Do you not clock what's going on in the world of high school? And then she was like, oh, okay. Can you come the next day? And I didn't have an exam the day after. So I was like, yeah, okay, I guess. So I went to Sydney the next day and did all these photo shoots and all these interviews. And I had just finished my first exam, and I didn't tell anyone either. I didn't tell quite a few people because I was so mindful of how it was going to potentially impact my work, I think. I mean, it was already like, I kind of had to compartmentalize it really, like, as a matter of urgency, because you're in this English exam, you got one shot at this thing you've been working towards for so long. You can't have like the thought in your head. Like, I did have a few moments when I was like in the exam, I was like, oh yeah, well, anyway. But I didn't tell people because I didn't want people to be like, okay, well then none of this matters, because there's that silly, like, you know, interpretation of just like, okay, well, if you're going to do this thing, then go off and do it. And school and my education and study, like, it mattered to me so much. It had so much value. So yeah, it was a really weird time in my life. And when I think about the fact that I was 18, that makes me like quite stressed in hindsight. I feel it's so baby. But Millie and the whole team at APRA was so amazing and welcoming to both me and my mom, who came with me to Sydney to kind of, accept the award.
That's awesome. And a good lesson out there for, again, any songwriters who are thinking of entering the Vanda and Young Songwriting Competition, get amongst it. So you graduated high school and you went to Nashville. Was that one of the things that prize money afforded you the opportunity to do?
I think at one point, maybe. I think the trip that I took, I'm trying to remember. I think the interesting thing about the prize money was that, you know, when I kind of spoke to people about it, it was like, what is the best way? I put it away pretty immediately. I remember when it happened, because it's quite an overwhelming headline to be attached to, like that kind of number, and then your face. You're like, oh no. But I put it away and just kind of left it. And because people were saying things on the internet like, oh, she's going to have the most lit schoolies ever. I remember seeing that and being like, oh yeah, that's where it's going to go. Nice one, guys. But I think, that trip to Nashville, I think the biggest thing that prize did for me was the security that it provided me, meant that I could really take the time to work out what I wanted to do next and how I wanted to present my artist project, which was so important to me. It meant that though there was quite a bit of interest surrounding the project, I didn't have to necessarily sign with like the first label that offered me. And like, you know, I got to actually think about, okay, well, what's going to suit my artist project and who's going to be the best team for me. And I was also still so little that I didn't really want to have a lot of those really big, important conversations then. I wanted to kind of just do life for a bit. But I mean, in the industry, of course, like, it's quite difficult. It was like suddenly my full-time job. And I think that having won that prize meant that there was this relief that came with not having to worry about a lot of those like urgent things right away, which meant that I could just pour all my energy into making here and now and getting to know my new management and not having to worry necessarily about the debut album at that point either. And I also got to just like be in my early 20s or be in my late teens. I got to go to Europe with my girlfriends. I got to spend time overseas seeing the world and soaking it up and getting perspective and growing, and all of those things I feel like were really crucial in what made this thing, you know, in the long run. And and I think I'm so grateful for just the security that prize. It was such an honor as well, just to say that I've won such an incredible songwriting competition is something that, when I remember it, I just feel so grateful and so honored that my work as a writer was recognized in such an important space. So yeah, I'm really I still can't believe it. All these years later.
Well, you mentioned begin to look around. Let's talk about that, because I think I'd read a quote from you around about the time of Drive that there was perhaps a little bit of pressure to do your debut album, and you thought at the time that you weren't like really practicing songwriting enough. Like you weren't just really getting in there every day and doing songwriting, but in the lead up to begin to look around. So in the last couple of years, is that what you really sort of got stuck into?
Yeah. I mean, when did I get stuck into that? I kind of got stuck into writing Begin to Look Around probably like end of 2018, it was really the start of 2019, really. I mean, I had kind of dabbled a little bit in co-writing. I actually went to my first APRA song hubs in Nashville, which was also just like a huge, like, that changed my life. That changed the way that I approached making the next thing, because I had never done any co-writing before. And yeah, as you said, I kind of stopped practicing songwriting, but stepping into that co-writing space and meeting all of my beautiful co-writer friends, a lot of them who were like in my age group as well, which was new to me at the time. I think that in terms of where I'd been in like my circles in the industry, like a lot of people I was working with were like 8 to 10 years my senior, which was like totally fine. But then I met, you know, these writers who kind of had been writing either for as long as me or just were equally as fixated on like, let's make a great song. And they were just like my peers at my age. And I was like, oh, there you are. Great. So I met them at the APRA song hubs in Nashville. And then kind of was like, okay, well, I think I need to get into co-writing more. I think that could be a really interesting direction. And then I kind of spent 2019 in lots of different sessions throwing paint at the wall and seeing what stuck in that sense. Yeah, which is just so fun, so good.
And it is that process, isn't it, of throwing paint at the wall? Because I guess, you know, I've read songwriters talk about the fact that part of songwriting is learning how to fail. So, it's being okay with not getting the best song that day, but there's always tomorrow. So you come back and you try again. Is that your experience?
Yeah, definitely. I think that like, I think learning how to fail, and I feel like also maybe just learning that sometimes the idea is what it's meant to be when it presents itself. I think the biggest issue that I had for years as someone that wrote by myself and had been writing since I was 7. So of course I was going to get into a habit of like, oh, I need to make it better and better. And then when there are eyes on the project, it's like, that's just amplified.
Yeah.
But I think, yeah, the idea of like, sometimes you sing a melody because it's supposed to be that melody and you don't have to go over and change it and kind of like ache over making it exactly the right fit. Sometimes it's just like meant to be like that. And when you work with other people, they don't have the ego attached to the idea because it's not necessarily like theirs. And like if they think that it's good, they'll just go, yeah, okay, cool. Okay, so for the verse melody, and then they'll just move on to the next thing. So you also learn, as much as learning to fail, you learn the right balance of detachment. And then you kind of capture this really present feeling in the space of the writing room. I felt like the songs for Begin to Look Around for me personally were so much easier for me to dive into emotionally and really relate to them for a long time. Whereas with my EPs, you know, I spent so long writing those songs that I had to kind of find my attachment to them again in the recording process. Whereas with the Begin to Look Around songs, it was like, that was exactly what I was feeling that day. I wasn't so mindful of like how the song was going to sound, that the emotion got lost in the process, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. Did you, when you, at that start of that writing process for Begin to Look Around, did you have an idea in your head about the kind of album you wanted? How you wanted it to sound?
I knew I wanted it to be a pop record.
Right.
But that was kind of pretty much it. I didn't think it was going to tell the story that it did. I mean, the funny thing is, and I really do believe this at this point, you like are like, oh yeah, I've got to do the next thing, I suppose. And then life just goes, oh, you do you? Okay. And then just like everything, sorry, that was really rude. But no, it kind of just, all of this crap happens. And I feel like I was talking to my friend Dave the other day, who's in Gang of Yates, and he was kind of like, yeah, there is this like inescapable kind of suffering that comes with a lot of songwriting. Not to say that it's like bad things have to happen in order to get good songs, but sometimes I feel like as a creative, like the moments for me that have been really interesting as a writer is it's like you have to look at the situation that you're in and be like, okay, what can I gain from this? I wrote this song called Better about lockdown with my friend Japanese Wallpaper, and there's a lyric in this, there's something to gain from this. And I really do think that that kind of, I would apply that to like all of the songs that I've written, and definitely with writing Begin to Look Around, I was like not in a great space, but okay, this is a bit of a tangent, but I do have to say it. There's this beautiful fan of my project, this girl called Dina, and she put up this post yesterday about her relationship with the album and kind of how it's been soundtracking her life, and I guess her relationship with my music, which was really amazing and emotional for me to read. But she quoted this song on my record, The Cure. There's this lyric, there's growth in falling apart. And she said, falling apart is the best thing that's ever happened to me, which just like gave me like full goosebumps. I just thought that was so special and amazing. And yeah, I mean, this is obviously, I've gone way off the question, but I don't think I thought that the emotional arc of Begin to Look Around was going to be quite the way that it was. And then, you know, but life happened. I just took what it was giving me, and I wrote the record, and you know, and that's how it goes every time. So yeah,
it's a moment in time, right? It's what you have to react to. What's around you.
Yes,
there is
absolutely.
one of the lyrics are so key to your work for Begin to Look Around, but all the way back to Elsewhere as well. Is it true? So you carry a journal around with you, and you always have it with you to jot down ideas?
Absolutely. Yes. Always the journal, always the handwritten lyrics, never the computer until we have enough lyrics, because there's something about the screen that I just find, like, I don't want to, I think there's a flow with handwriting, and most of my journals and songwriting books are kind of interwoven as well. And so I definitely have a very detailed like documentation of the process of writing Begin to Look Around, because I know that journal is from like those couple of months, and then I can be like, okay, so those songs, the starts of like those songs will be in the journal as well. And it was really nice getting to go back through them when I wanted to show people like, these are the original handwritten lyrics for Cherish, and then you like turn the page and there's just the worst journal entry. It's so sad. You're like, whoa, did not need to be reminded of that time. But then also I don't know, I was saying this the other day to someone, I think that like the idea of being able to document all that you go through means that no matter what, having that ability to reflect and look over your work, whether it be listening to old songs that you wrote or looking back over journal entries that you wrote, you can go, oh yeah, I'm definitely not there right now. Like, it's very rare that I think people read a journal entry from a few years ago, especially when you're like my age, I suppose, and be like, yeah, that's exactly where I'm at right now too. Nothing's changed. It's the same. Like, it never is. And it either you go, oh, I was much happier then, I want to try and get to a place like that again, or you go, wow, I've grown so much from that space. So big advocate for journaling, morning pages as well, from the Artist's Way, that practice of doing 3 stream of consciousness handwritten pages a morning.
Yeah,
doing that for a while. Yep.
I was going to ask you about that book.
Sorry,
because that book is important to you. I was going to ask you about that book, the Julia Cameron book, The Artist's Way. That's important to you.
Like, it's a Bible. Absolutely, it's so important to me. I did that practice for the first time in lockdown last year. So for anyone that's here that doesn't know The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron, it's basically like it's a 12-week course essentially in a book, and it basically helps you uncover, it's targeted for people that want to like rediscover their creative self. But I think that even if you're in a really creative space, it's super helpful as well, because it asks you questions and it gets you to do activities that make you think about things in like a different way, I suppose. And there's a lot of really interesting tasks. And as someone that loves studying so much and learning so much, and I'm not at uni, that was just like, I was so excited to get back into it. And I did all of the tasks like with such joy, and my brain was so full at that point. But yeah, morning pages have been a big thing in my life, really important.
That's great. Greta, just a few more things before we finish up. I guess, again, for any songwriters who are watching this, I'm sure they would love to know any particular tips you have for songwriters about, how to get your emotions down on page or in music, or even when to know when a song is done, or all sorts of, I'm sure there's a lot of wisdom you could impart. Is there any one or two things in particular that you've really learned in your songwriting career? Not to put you on the spot.
Oh, wow. I think I really want to say when you're writing, I think that you need to focus on just being with the feeling and conveying in your writing however that feels best to you and the story. And that is the only audience you should be worrying about in the session or in like when you're writing. I think that sometimes it is really fun when you get to a point in writing a song or making a demo where you go, oh, there's like this backing vocal, maybe an audience could sing that. Like I did that a bit with my song Bigger Than Me. But I think as soon as you have the voices in your head that go, oh, what are people going to think of this? It's good enough. Like you really spoil the creative process. And I think that there's a privacy to it that I think is really sacred. It's for you and the other people in the room with you. And you just need to serve the music and the idea and nurture that. And then when it's ready, it will become other people's and that will be beautiful too. But as it's being created, just like protect it. Kind of like, what's an analogy for this? I don't know. I feel like when someone's like pregnant, they're being really protective and mindful of the fact that they're growing a human and not like doing anything crazy. It's like, okay, we need to grow this thing and like love it and make sure that I'm taking care of myself. Like it's the same kind of thing. I think the space of creating a song should be really protective and sacred. And so that is a piece of advice. And I think as well, I mean, this is very specific to my own experience, but I just think the best thing for me has been listening to so much music, like listening to as much music as you can, and just really trusting other people's ideas as well. And I think it's good to go with your gut on some things, but like when I stood back and listened, it was just the biggest shift for me personally, and I learned so much. And now I have more of a palette to work with. I have an expanded skill set. And so I think that as well is that'd be my advice. Yeah, but I'm still new. I'm still brand new. I still think I'm like a baby in the songwriting space. So.
Well, they were great pieces of advice. If I wrote songs, then I would be taking them on. There is a question here that someone has asked. Stella Houlihan, is your Like a Version of Gang of Youth's cover going to be on Spotify? I'm in love with it.
You're sneaky. No, there have been a lot of people asking that question, which is very lovely. I'm so glad that you like it. I don't know when it's going to be out on Spotify yet. It's not in like my control. There's things with like copyright and label and when things can. As soon as I know, I will tell you as soon as possible. I asked immediately. I didn't. It's a process. So I will get it up there as soon as as the people say that it's okay. That's the answer.
Fantastic, Gretta. Thank you so much for your time. Just a reminder to everyone who doesn't know, Gretta's new album, Begin to Look Around, is out now. A reminder also that the Vanda Young Global Songwriting Competition is open to all songwriters around the world, published or unpublished, and those entries close on October the 8th. And if you make music, if you have anything to do in music, check out Jaxsta.com, Jaxsta.com, for all your music credits and to claim your profile and find lots of great tools that can help your career. But Gretta, thank you so much for your time. It's been such a pleasure to speak with you.
Yeah, you too. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, take care. Bye.
Bye.